Jack Phillips, the owner of Masterpiece Cake Shop, filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court on Tuesday accusing state officials of religious hostility. The suit followed a discrimination complaint based on the shop's refusal to bake a cake for a celebration of a gender transition. The suit asks for $100,000 and permanent injunctions from future anti-discrimination suits. Patty, Jack Phillips has been in the news nationally, I think in some cases internationally, for the case with the Supreme Court that really for all intents and purposes he won. This is a different complaint, and now he's on the attack of suing the state of Colorado. A couple different angles here, take your pick.
Well, if I were at the Colorado Civil Rights Division, I would have wept the day this complaint came in, and I'm guessing they probably did, because it's a win-win for the transgender lawyer who filed it, who filed the complaint, Autumn Scardino, because she wanted a transgender cake, pink on the inside, I think blue on the outside. Asked for it the day the Supreme Court decision came down. Jack Phillips Masterpiece Bakery said no. They're winning incredible amounts of publicity. They've got a big campaign going. But the state of Colorado, which has to investigate every complaint, which I happen to know because they've investigated complaints against me and Westward for running ads for ladies' nights, just being the vehicle of it. And fortunately, I would say they came down on the right side on that one. But they have to look into the complaints. I think they did a fairly careful job on this, but they were going to lose no matter how they came down. They just must have wept to see this complaint come in because they know it's opening it up all over again.
David, as usual, you are our esteemed lawyer at the table. There are a couple different angles here. I guess the one I'm most interested in, but take your pick about where you want to go, is the idea of suing to get permanent injunctions from future anti-discrimination suits. I guess the point, but that seems like a get-out-of-jail-free card that wouldn't be handed out very freely. I'm not the lawyer you are. What do you think?
It's an extraordinary remedy, but extraordinary remedies are appropriate when there is extraordinary defiance of a United States Supreme Court decision on civil rights. In the Masterpiece Cake Shop case, the U.S. Supreme Court, all 9 justices with different takes on that particular issue, but they all agreed you can never force someone to express a particular message that person doesn't want to express. So the question is, well, it's just a generic wedding cake, is that an expression or not? Here, there's no dispute about it. The lawyer who started harassing Masterpiece Cake Shop on the day the Supreme Court decision was announced, first asked them to make a cake with Satan on it, fondling a large male sexual organ. And this goes on with a number of abusive requests to convey a particular message. And obviously Masterpiece Cake Shop would not say, oh, we'd be happy to make a satanic cake for someone who's a heterosexual, but not for someone who's transgender. They wouldn't make that cake for anyone. And so then this next complaint is that the lawyer asks for a cake to celebrate the sex change operation. And the Masterpiece Cake Shop would not make a cake conveying that message, and it doesn't matter who the customer is, whether it's someone who had a sex change operation or it's a cake to celebrate someone else's or whatever. The Civil Rights Division went far beyond investigating, which, as Patty said, it has a duty to do. It issued a probable cause finding against Jack Phillips in this case of obvious mean-spirited harassment of his civil rights, and the Commission and the Division are on the wrong side of a unanimous Supreme Court.
Susan, the Commission serves a very important point for Colorado. We've had a long history as a state of actual problems and discrimination to solve, but I could also see here that there's enough wiggle room here that's going to get a little messy. When you look at all different sides of this, what kind of things come to your mind?
What comes to mind is that the Supreme Court, yes, decided in Jack Phillips' favor in that case, but it left broad areas of religious liberties and the constitutionality of this issue open. I mean, this is by no means decided, right? The Commission has a job to do, and to somehow make this extraordinary exception for Jack Phillips almost dissolves or makes irrelevant its mission. I mean, that's a slippery slope. Once you let someone go, you've got to let everybody go. And frankly, the $100,000 he's seeking is probably nothing compared to what the state spends litigating this case. That said, Alliance Defending Freedom, which is the sort of right-wing conservative Christian legal juggernaut that is defending Jack, this suit is probably the best thing that ever happened to them, because they get to keep sending Chinese water torture emails about Jack and how persecuted he is. I mean, these emails, and I get them, they liken overtly and sort of more subtly Jack Phillips to Jesus, right? You know, they're on a crusade, the state is on a crusade to crush him. They, you know, the state despises his religious views. He's being persecuted. You know, there's so much rhetoric and so much money going into the people who are defending him here. It keeps it in the news, and I think, frankly, because there aren't that many cases in the country like this, they're thrilled. And I want to respond to something David just said. Deriding the customer, the transgender woman's legal prowess, is ridiculous here. I mean, this is a constitutional issue that is still being left open. I mean, it's not completely solved by the Supreme Court case. So you talk about mean-spirited, I think it's mean-spirited to go after her abilities as a lawyer.
Ross, let's get into the political side of this, because I think Susan brings a good point about, after all the legal sides, you have a political tool, frankly, for both sides, but I think especially effective one for folks on the conservative side of this thing. Does this become more of a political issue than it really is anything close to a legal issue?
Wow. Well, it's been a political issue for a long time. For me, even though I'm sort of a political junkie, I think the legal side of it is more interesting and more important. The Supreme Court, they did rule 5-4 in favor of Jack Phillips, but what they really ruled was that the first time the ruling came down, it was motivated and influenced by anti-religious bias within the commission. They didn't really rule on the merits of the case in terms of whether Jack Phillips would be permitted. They didn't really reach that question, whether he would be permitted to refuse this service. One of the things that's kind of frustrating for me, and for the record, I'm a not very religious Jew who doesn't share any of Jack Phillips' views on, same-sex whatever. But the First Amendment to the United States, indeed the founding of the United States before the Constitution, was about religious freedom. And I find it beyond obnoxious that anybody would think that Jack Phillips has to make a cake when there's a baker next door or a baker across the street. I think it should be an easy question, and I find it kind of shocking that courts in this country repeatedly rule the other way in favor of the aggrieved customer. One other quick point. It's possible that the reason the Supreme Court went the way they did the first time was because if they had tried to reach the merits of the issue, that Justice Kennedy might have sided with the liberals and ruled against Jack Phillips. And so they came with this other thing about the commission. Now that Kennedy's gone, when Kavanaugh's on the court, there's a decent chance that if they reach the merits, that it will go in favor of Jack Phillips, where with Kennedy on the court, it might not have.